And we honestly love gathering as a community and talking about what it looks like to follow Jesus. And we really believe that wherever you're at on your faith journey, like whether you know who Jesus is or you don't know who Jesus is, wherever you're at on your journey, you belong here. And we mean it. And we love that people are here journeying together. Which kind of makes me think of a journey that I did when I was a lot younger. So here's a story, and it's a doozy. No, it's actually not a doozy. It's a normal story. Went on a journey. So I was younger. I was with my dad and my two brothers. I don't know how old I was. I was probably like in middle school or something like that. We grew up in Washington State, and my family, we were in the Cascade Mountains, which is a big mountain range on the West Coast, just camping. And my dad thought like, hey boys, there's three of us boys, let's go on a hike. And we were kind of near like the top of a mountain. It was like, I don't know, 5-10 miles up to the top of it. And so we were like, okay, let's go on a hike. Dad wants us to go on a hike together. So I don't know how prepared, like minded you are if you go on a walk or you go on a hike. I'm the kind of guy now that when I go like somewhere, I try to be prepared. I'm like, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Okay, I got to have a first aid kit, all that. That is not my dad. We were so unprepared that we didn't even have water. So I love my dad, but he does not get Father of the Year award for this. But here we were. We started going on this trail up this mountain. Also, it was summer, and it was extremely hot. So I think we were just going to go on like a short hike, but we were like really getting into it, and we were like, we're going to go to the top of this mountain. After like an hour, I don't know if you've ever been really thirsty before, you know, whether you're playing sport or it's just really hot outside or working or whatever, but you just get really thirsty, right? So like my tongue started like absorbing all of the saliva in my mouth. I'm like, it's fine. We kept hiking. Another hour passed. And my tongue started kind of like turning into sandpaper, you know. I was just getting really, really dry. Another hour passed, and like literally the people who were going down the mountain, I was judging every single one of them. I was like, do you not see that I'm a child about to die? Like, can you not give me what's left in your water bottle? Every person, I was just glaring at them. And they're like, what's that dehydrated kid doing looking at me? Another hour passed. I have like, literally never been that thirsty in my entire life. I have never been that thirsty. I don't know if you've ever experienced thirst before, dehydration, but literally your body wants to do anything that it can to make you not thirsty. There were these disgusting muddy puddles at the edge of like the trail. And I was like, oh, that's gross. I'll never drink that. A couple hours in, like, oh, okay. Hey, what's up? You know, how you doing, muddy puddles? And then another hour, I'm like, I am fighting, literally getting down on my knees and drinking this water. I was that thirsty. Things were just kind of getting fuzzy, and my head was getting light. And I was like definitely dipping into dehydration. And my dad and my brothers, they were feeling the same way. But then something happened. You see, we were getting kind of towards the top of the mountain, and the air started to chill a little bit. If you've ever been up on a mountain, the higher elevation you go, the colder it gets, and something shifted in our minds. We stopped thinking about what isn't good for us but we want to go to, and we started thinking, is there something better for us right in front of our faces that we could go to? Because we remembered, like, you know, you get these little water bottles at the store and they say, a fresh high mountain spring. We're like, there's probably a high mountain spring here somewhere, like with fresh water that goes down. Like it's like kind of the most pure water, the fresh water. Aquafina kills for these springs. So instead of looking for these like muddy little puddles, we thought, okay, we need to open our eyes, switch our focus from the muddy puddles to a high mountain spring. So we kept searching. And we found it. And just think of the first time you were like really, really thirsty and you drank like a cold glass of water. It was literally the best thing that I have ever had. Like my whole body just felt like the burst of cold and like life going through it. It was amazing. It was stupid that we didn't bring water, but we found water at the top in like a great location. And really the game changer, where we had to intentionally shift our focus from these muddy puddles that in the moment, if I would have gone to it with my dehydration, in the moment I would have been like, oh, this feels so good. But then what happens? Really, really bad stuff, because it's not good for my body, all the bad bacteria and viruses that could be in it. We shifted our focus to what was right in front of us, something that was better for us. Now we're concluding this series that we've been going through, Psalm 23, Life Without Lack, and we're looking at this passage right here. It says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." You prepare a table before me. I have a table right here. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Or you prepare a high mountain spring of fresh water in the presence of my dehydration, in the presence of my body shutting down. God, you prepare what I need and invite me to shift my focus to it. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I think it's a really important message. And as your pastor, I just want to really invite you to consider, when you are in the presence of your enemies, when you are in the presence of hardships, of things happening, either metaphorical enemies or real enemies, there's an invitation to shift your focus to what God is doing in the middle of your circumstances. That's where I want to go. That's what I want to talk about. But first, I want to do a little work breaking down this passage. Because if you're not an expert at ancient Near Eastern table manners and what it looks like to invite someone in, I want to talk about that to educate us, because it'll help give context to what this author, David, is really, really talking about. Okay, so before we get to this, we heard Sam read the Psalms. We started in the shepherd-sheep relationship, God and we are his sheep, and now we enter into this host-guest relationship that David is ending in. And there's a couple things to know about ancient Near Eastern. That's long time ago in the Near East, different cultural practices. So one, if I'm a host and I invite a guest to my house, this passage is saying a couple things that were pretty popular and traditional. So I would anoint their head with oil. If you come to my house and I anoint your head with oil, just probably run, because that's kind of weird. You're like, what is that, Crisco? What's going on? But really, it was probably fresh, really pure olive oil, which was just a really hot commodity, expensive, and it was infused with perfumes. And so what that meant is if someone came to your house, if they were an honored guest, you would anoint their head with perfume, with oil. It's kind of like maybe giving someone a jacket or something like that nowadays. So that's the first thing that's going on in the psalm. The second thing that's going on in the psalm, my cup overflows. So here's a funny thing about me moving to the Midwest. The first couple times I didn't really get it. I'd be sitting with some friends. We'd be sharing an appetizer. And I'm like, oh man, these are really good cheese curds. You guys weren't messing around when you're talking about these cheese curds. And then there will be one there, you know what I'm getting at, right? The one cheese curd, and the West Coast guy is thinking are you gonna eat that? Why am I not supposed to? No one's eating it. And everyone's like, oh, I don't want to be the person to eat the last one, because that's a sin in the Midwest. And I'm going it's getting cold, people. Will someone eat it? And oh, I just couldn't. I just couldn't. So think about it. Next time you share an appetizer, you might not be aware of it, but there will be one cheese curd there. Just next time you go there, just think. It's instinctive. But the Bible is saying the opposite in this. It's saying that when you go to the Lord's table, there's an abundance. There isn't a fear of, oh, I don't want to get that last piece. It's, no, you get that last piece, because then there's going to be more. There's going to be more. My cup overflows. It's this invitation to not worry about money, not worry about if they won't have enough, but at the Lord's table, it's abundant. It's overflowing. And the last thing is that if you have enemies around, when you're invited to this host's house, they'll actually protect you. The enemies actually can't harm you when you're in protection of the host. So there's a couple different cultural things going on here. And David is saying to us the readers, that just like people going into a host's house, the invitation is there for you too. That no matter what's going on in your life, there's a table prepared for you. In the presence of your enemies, in the presence of your hard circumstances, in the presence of anxiety, in the presence of depression, in the presence of hard life circumstances, when life feels like it's caving in, God is saying, I've prepared a table for you. And you're my honored guest, you. Your cup, it's not half empty, it's overflowing, and you're protected. And I like where the verse goes on from here, the passage. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. But Michael, let's be honest. You're saying love and goodness and love will follow me? Like, I got a lot of hard things following me right now. I'm trying my best. Anxiety is following me. Hardships are following me. And you're saying goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life? Like, where is it? I'm looking for it, but it's not behind me. Because if I'm honest, like a table, I can't see a table. I see hardships. I see enemies. Because if I'm honest, maybe you're thinking about yourself right now and your circumstances, because things can be tough, right? It's not only just experiencing goodness and love, this enemy thing, this hardship thing can be real. You might be thinking, if I'm honest, man, I'm applying to internships right now, or I'm applying to jobs, or I'm applying to grad school, and I just feel insecure. Because what if they don't accept me for who I am? What if they see my life's work in school and they say, not good enough? There's an insecurity there. Or I might be experiencing that right now. Because if I'm honest, school's pretty hard. Midterms are never ending. It's getting dark outside at 4:30, like what's going on? Things feel like it's kind of caving in right now. Because if I'm honest, relationships are hard. The people that I'm interested in pursuing me aren't pursuing me. The people that I'm interested in aren't interested in me, and I feel lonely. I don't want to live forever alone. Like, because if I'm honest, I was in a relationship, now I'm not. And I'm trying to cobble back who I am and a healthy version of me, but it's hard. Because if I'm honest, man, I'm busy. I have so many things that I'm doing, and I don't see excitement in what I'm doing. I'm not looking forward to tomorrow, but tomorrow's coming. Because if I'm honest, when I look in the mirror, I don't like who I see. And I'm trying to do everything that I can to be a better version of me, but there's a wall that I feel like I'm hitting. Because if I'm honest, I'm more aware of the presence of my enemies, the things that I'm going through, than the presence of God's table when I read that passage. But here's a question that I want to ask you. What if, instead of focusing on the hardships that are there, we shift our focus to try to find the table that God has put out before you in the presence of your enemies? Because here's the reality. In our life, and no matter what you're going through right now, you're going to have hardships. You're going to. But you're also going to have an invitation of abundance that God is giving you, not just in eternity, but right now. And the invitation for us is, what if we opened our eyes to see if we can notice it? What would happen? But here's kind of where it gets a little tough. And this is what I find myself doing. Like, I can find myself spending so much time focusing on the table that the world has prepared for me than the table that God has prepared for me. Can you relate? I can find so much time focusing on the table that the world is giving me than the table that God is preparing for me. The world's table says that I have to be the most successful person, right? The world's table says that I have to have like this robust social media if that's kind of something that you feel like you want to hit. The world's table is saying that like in order to be someone, I have to be successful. The world's table is saying that you got to make money because if you don't have money, like you don't have happiness. The world's table is saying if you don't have a lot of friends, if you don't have attraction and beauty, if you don't have the right partner, the world's table is saying that you don't have anything. There's so much pressure that this world's table can give to us. The world's table says that we have to do everything in our power to have a seat at the world's table. I want to say that again. The world's table says that we have to do everything in our power to have a seat at the world's table, but not God's table. At God's table, God has done everything in his power so that you can sit at the table. It goes from what do I have to do to God has done it for me. How can I earn the seat to where's the seat? You've prepared it. And that's an invitation that God is giving us in this passage. But the problem is that we can be so focused on the world's table that we can overlook God's table. Even when he's prepared it right in front of us, we can look at the muddy puddles and be like, oh, this is a quick fix. This is a quick thing that's going to help me, but you know it's not going to help you. We're invited to shift our focus to find the spring, to find the cup that's overflowing in us. I want to talk about someone in the Bible real quick who did that, who shifted his focus. His name is Paul, the Apostle Paul. So Paul, he wrote about 2/3 of the New Testament. So this guy, like, he wrote a lot of books, and he wrote a lot of books to different churches. They had a lot of problems, a lot of different situations, and we get different books, and that's him addressing those churches. And one of them is the book of Philippians. And I'm going to be honest with you, I love the book of Philippians. I don't know if you've read the book of Philippians, but I love it because the theme in Philippians is joy. We all want joy, right? Joy is a good thing. I want to be joyful. In times when I'm searching for joy, I'll open up to the book of Philippians. Here's a couple passages that Philippians has that Paul writes on joy. In all my prayers for you, I will always pray with joy. And because of this, I rejoice. Yes, and I will continue to rejoice. I am glad and I rejoice with all of you, so you too should be glad and rejoice. See the theme going on? I'm saying joy and rejoice a lot. A couple more. Further, my brothers and sisters, rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. The last one, I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Okay, Brother Paul, we know you rejoice a lot. We know you're joyful. That's great. There's a book that's really centered in the Bible around joy. It's like the joy book. But what do we mean by renewed your concern for me? Like, why is the church in Philippians concerned about Paul? Well, when Paul wrote this book, he was in prison. He was in jail. And not like a 21st century American jail. I've never been to jail, but I'm just assuming that, you get your waits time, you get your TV time, you get your meal time. Yeah, you're stripped of a lot of freedoms, but you get your bed, you get your heat, you get your clothes, you get all that stuff. Not a first century prison. First century prison, he's chained to a wall, often like in a cave-like situation, in his filth. And if he needs water or he needs food, he has to depend on family or friends to bring it to him. So Paul is in this horrible situation, and he's writing about joy. It's like, why? How, Paul? If I was in prison in like a first century Roman and that was happening to me, I would not be joyful. Let's just say that. I would be really, really sad. But Paul is writing about joy. Why? Because he knew that he was sitting at God's table in the middle of it. This is what Paul said in Philippians. But even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I'm glad and rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me. To Paul, telling the church in Philippians that there is a God who loves them, that came down and died and rose again, so that they can know Jesus and be with him forever, that was more important to him than anything that was going on. He shifted his focus to the joy that was set before him. But here's the deal. Like, you might be listening to that. If you're like me, you're like, okay, that's kind of a high bar, right? Okay, Paul's like a super, super, super Christian. He taught us what it looks like to be a Christian. Yeah, he's in jail, but like, that's kind of a high bar. Like, I totally get it. And I just want to say that when you're going through difficult things, as a pastor, I want to say it's okay to not be okay. You know, you hear that phrase a lot. It's actually okay to be angry. It's actually okay to doubt. It's actually okay to read scripture and be like, I don't get that. And I don't know if I agree with that. I'm going to lean in and wrestle. It's okay to say like, God, I'm angry with you. God's shoulders are big enough to beat on. His chest is big enough to beat on. It's okay to wrestle and to struggle. That's okay. But at the end of the day, whose table are you sitting at? God's table? Or the world's table? If you don't know, what would it look like to shift focus to God's table? Here's an example in my life. There's so many things that I could talk about, but the first thing, so when I was like 20, like my goal for life wasn't to be rich. It wasn't to be famous. It was, I wanted to get married. I wanted to have kids. So when I needed a car when I was 20, like a lot of my friends, like they got like kind of like older, like sports cars or trucks, like really cool cars. I got like a boxy sedan with child seat anchors. And I did that on purpose. It was a perfectly like terrible car that was gray, nothing great about it, but it had child seat anchors. And I'm like, that's my car. Because I just knew that I was going to get married. I was going to have a kid. I wanted it. It was the most important thing to me. But for some reason, like I didn't find the person that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. It was the early 20s. Mid-20s, same thing happened. Dated some people, couldn't find the person that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. Late 20s, same thing happened, had to get a new car. Early 30s, same thing. Mid-30s, same thing. Starting into my late 30s, the same thing. And if you would have told me, but just be joyful because the Lord has a table for you, I would have said, get out of here. You don't know what it's like to be single, and the one thing you want was to be with someone, and that's out of your reach. And the question that I had in my life was why? Why, God? I would go on walks, and I would be angry with God. I'm like, why? Why? You knew this is the one thing that I wanted. Why? I would talk with pastors. Why? Why? I would go to counseling, and I would tell my counselor, like, why? Why? Until one of my counselors said, Michael, I want to challenge you. I said, what? I'm like, uh-oh. This was when I was 37. She said that, I want to challenge you to make the decision and honestly feel this and know this in your being that God is enough for you. I was like, what? She said, if you're 40, if you're 45, if you're 50, and you are still single, what would it look like in that moment to say, God is enough? And I told her, that's impossible. I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. So I left, and then I just felt like something like tugging in my heart. So I like to go on walks. That's how I connect with God. So I would go on these walks and be like, God, honestly, I don't think you're enough. Like, you're my God, and I follow you, and I read my Bible, and I pray, and I worship, and I go to different groups. I go to church. But at the end of the day, like, my worst nightmare is being alone. I can't. For 3 weeks, I would go on a walk and say, like, I can't. Until finally I came to the decision to say, like, okay, I feel like it's a risk. I'm going to risk it. And I meant it. I'm like, you are enough, God. It took 3 weeks of wrestling. I'm like, if I never find anyone, I make the decision that you're enough. And that was for me, and I'm just saying my circumstance. I'm not saying that you have to do this too. If you're like leaning in, you're like, that's kind of where I'm at right now. For me, that's what I needed to do. And it was like I was carrying a backpack of rocks, and I just set it down. And then something happened over the next few months, and I wasn't expecting it. It was like I stopped worrying about finding someone to give to me, and I started filling that hole with God and with healthy community. And what happened is I became open to the things that God was giving me and teaching me and loving me and showing me. And I'm like, I want to give this to other people, right? So I started giving that more and more to other people. I'm like, God, you're enough. I don't need someone. And I started giving it. And this is not a formula, but I found a girl named Cassie. And we started dating, and we're married now. And I am so thankful that I went through that season, because God showed me, and again, this is just my story, how when I am not trying to take from someone and I'm trying to live for God because he's enough, he's going to give to me, and I'm open to it, and I'm able to give that to Cassie, and it's the best gift that I can give someone as a husband. Now, I'm not saying that that's a formula for people. I'm not saying that, like, you just got to come to the place where God's enough and then he's going to find your spouse. That would be awesome, because then there you go. Everyone's going to be married next year. No, in whatever situation that you're going through, God works in different ways. I'm sharing what God did for me, but the thing that's universal, whether it's about a spouse or dating or anxiety or depression or whatever you're going through, maybe there's someone in your family that is sick, maybe you're sick, maybe you're doubting, maybe you're wrestling, whatever your story is, there's an invitation to switch your focus from the muddy pond water that this world has in their goblet, in their glass, saying drink, to say, no, I'm going to find Jesus' water for me. I'm going to search for it. Because if he loves me with an everlasting love, if it's true that God, when Jesus was on the cross, he was thinking of me, he was thinking of you, if you were worth God dying so that he can be resurrected, so that you can be resurrected, if you were worth that, you are, then he's prepared a table for you in the presence of your enemies. No matter what you're going through, and like Paul, we can go through some hard things. When you follow Jesus, it doesn't mean it's a get out of jail free card. No, if you read the New Testament, it's often accepting more suffering in your life. But in the middle of that suffering, your King has prepared a table for you. And in that, you are a special guest. And not only that, your cup is overflowing. And not only that, you're safe. And you will ultimately be safe with Jesus. I don't even know where I'm at in my notes. But let's go to the end of this verse again. This passage. Surely you're good. I'll read the whole thing. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. If you've made the decision to follow Jesus, why would you settle for the muddy puddle water that the world gives? In your life and in your situation, have you? It's okay if you have. There's areas in my life where I do. But what would it look like to take a step towards what God is offering you in the presence of your circumstances? What would that look like? Because he's prepared a table for you. And I love how it ends. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You're not only invited to his table right now in your circumstance, but you're invited to stay in his house forever. If you've made the decision to follow Jesus, the table is just the starter. But theologically, a table is actually significantly important, okay? So the table is all throughout the Bible. When God was about to rescue his people, the Israelites, from the Egyptians, there's this Passover meal, this beautiful, bountiful table of food, and they ate. Revelations, that's a last book of the Bible. It says when we are resurrected with Jesus, when we are in heaven in eternity, it will be like a wedding feast where there's food, dancing, and your cup is overflowing. The table is such an important metaphor. And when Jesus was about to die, he found himself at a table. He was surrounded with his disciples. And at that table, it wasn't just, if you do communion, you get the little cracker, and the little thimble of juice, and you're like, okay, I did my little thing. That's not really biblical. It's an abundance of bread, an abundance of food, and it's an abundance of drink. So we're going to do something different as a community. We've never done this. I've been the pastor for 6 years. We're actually going to be invited to come to the table tonight. In a little bit, we're going to be invited to take communion, and it's right here. We've prepared a table for you, and I want to talk a little bit about this. So first, the bread is actually great. It was just made yesterday and today. It's from a woman who's our downtown welcome coordinator. Her and her husband, Mo Cheeks. There you go. There's bread. Okay, it's kind of distracting me. Can we go back and do this a little later? I'm sorry. It's so cool. I just keep looking at it. You guys are awesome. So Mo Cheeks, he owns like a company called Bread and Justice, and 100% of what we paid for this and the bread that he makes goes towards local nonprofits, so super cool. But we're going to invite you to come to the table. And we have a ton of bread, and we have a ton of juice. And the invitation isn't just to come and take a little bit. It's to take a big piece. We've cut big pieces. Take a big piece. If all the pieces are taken, rip something. Take a full glass of juice, and we're going to invite you to go to your seat, and when the worship team comes up and they play, you can come up whenever, and then take your time and eat and drink, because there's an abundance for you. But here at Blackhawk, I want to talk a little bit about communion. So at Blackhawk, we believe that communion is for anyone who's made the decision to follow Jesus, for anyone. But we also know that Tuesday nights is a place where we have people, like I started with, everywhere when it comes with their faith journey. We have people here who have been following Jesus, and people who are here because they want to learn more about what that looks like. And so we believe that if you've made the decision to follow Jesus, we want to invite you to the table. And if you're at a place where you're like, hey, I'm just kind of kicking the tires right now, by you not coming to the table, that shows us that you respect what we do. And we also know that some people you might follow Jesus and you might not want to come to the table. That's totally you. So people will come, people won't. It's okay. We're not judging. This is a safe place for everyone. But before we get to that, I actually just want to pause. And I want to pray. Because I feel like there could be someone or some people here. You've been coming, and you haven't made the decision to follow Jesus. And maybe you're listening to me, and you're like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I've been going to church. I've been going to Tuesday nights. And if you would ask me if I'm a follower of Jesus, I don't know. But I want to invite you to pray a prayer with me right now if you're at a place where you are saying, like, I'm in. I want to be at that table. I want to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about communion, and then we're going to get on with the night. So if that's you in your head, feel free to pray with me. So Jesus, I don't know what it looks like to follow you, but I feel like there's more to this life than what I'm living. I feel like there's a bigger love out there. I feel that the love is from you. Jesus, I accept that you died on the cross for my sins, and you rose again, defeating death in me. I choose to follow you, Jesus. I love you. In your name, amen. Now, as the worship team's coming up here, I just want to go over kind of what Paul talks about on the New Testament. He says this: at the night that Jesus was betrayed, he was at a table like the one right here. He was with his disciples. And in the middle of that conversation that they were having, he took bread and he broke it. And he said, this bread is my body. It's broken for you. Eat this in remembrance of me. And in the same manner, he took the cup and he said, this cup is my blood. It's the blood of the covenant that's poured out for you. Drink this in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat of this bread and drink of this cup, you proclaim my death until I come again. Now, in a moment, I'm going to be done. Worship team's going to play. At any time, feel free to come. Grab a piece. If all the slices are done, rip a piece. And when you do, know that God's body was ripped and broken for you. hold the bread and know that it symbolizes Christ's body that was broken for you. Drink knowing symbolically that he shed his blood for you. Why? So that you can have a seat at the table and that you can dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So Jesus, as we get ready to go to the table, and after I'm done, as people, whenever they're ready, decide to come to the table, get some juice, get some bread, I pray that when they sit down and they hold the bread and they hold the wine and they eat the bread and they drink the juice, it's not wine, but I'm so used to that. When they drink the juice, God, I pray that the reality of what you did for them individually and collectively can be realized in them. I pray that this meal is personal. I pray that in this meal, they can experience individually their Savior sitting across from them. And you are saying, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden and burdened, and I will give you rest. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. That we can give to you what we're holding on to, Jesus, and then we can say, help me find that high mountain spring, because I'm done with these muddy puddles. Because you've prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies.